No one trusts my assertions. Neither my parents, nor my siblings, nor my friends. No one. I am an arborist, primarily engaged in rescuing trees from decline or removing deceased specimens upon request. It is my fervor, and I am enamored with my profession. Nonetheless, I found my previous tree work unsatisfactory. Negative. I had taken a few weeks off to cleanse my mind. It commenced ordinarily. I received a phone call from a delicate woman, Mrs. Gable, reporting that her tree is decayed and gradually collapsing, approaching her house. I accepted the position and informed her that I would arrive in a few days. I merely needed to complete another assignment. I arrived, and externally, all appeared satisfactory. It is an expansive residence for a petite woman. Nevertheless, I considered, if she has earned it, why not? I parked my van in her driveway and exited to prepare my climbing equipment. Upon exiting the van, I discerned noises emanating from her residence, including the sound of glass shattering and numerous deep voices shouting, succeeded by a prolonged, mournful scream. The scream can be likened to a sound emanating from an insane asylum. I observed an elderly woman gesticulating animatedly from one of the upper floor windows, as though engaged in a dispute. As I advanced a single step, her head abruptly turned towards me, and upon recognizing my presence, she swiftly retreated from the window with greater speed than I could muster. I knocked on her front door to introduce myself and ascertain her well-being. Approximately 10 seconds later, I heard, "Oh, gentle boy. Remain in that location." I had become sluggish in my advanced years. I have not observed what I just accomplished. This elicited a slight smirk from me. She ultimately reached the door to escort me to the rear garden so I could commence work on the tree. As I traversed the house, I surveyed my surroundings to ascertain whether anyone else resided there with her. The entire location was in utter disarray. The floor was strewn with excrement, shattered glass, and amusingly, baked beans. She guided me outdoors, and I feigned ignorance while she appeared oblivious as well. I continued with my task. In order to ascend a tree, I require a groundsman to guarantee my safety. Nonetheless, his absence caused me some distress. I commenced cutting what I could from the ground, and while doing so, I glanced back at the house and observed Mrs. Gable gazing down at me with an impassive expression. This concerned me somewhat, but I attributed it to another inquisitive customer. I continuously glanced upward every few minutes for the subsequent 50 minutes to ascertain her presence, and she remained there. She remains in the identical position with the same expression on her face. I felt uneasy and responded with a smile and a wave. She erupted in an odd laugh. Her lips agape and enlarged. The sound she emitted was so bizarre that it elicited goosebumps along my spine. She began to tap on the window with her index finger while singing the humorous farm song about someone coming to take her away. That marked the conclusion of my employment at this residence. I gathered all my equipment, sprang over a side fence, and departed. In my rearview mirror, I observed a woman seated in the center of the road, legs crossed, gesturing at me. My heart was racing uncontrollably. Although it is a small girl, my extensive exposure to horror films has taught me that one should refrain from exploring. I returned home and took the remainder of the day off. I engaged in a game of pool to distract myself from recent events. At approximately 9 p.m., I began to faintly hear that amusing farm song. The source was located at the terminus of my driveway. I informed other friends about the incident, leading me to presume it was merely one of them attempting to trick me. Upon hearing the song, it resonated deeply, prompting me to rush to the door. I opened the door and observed Mrs. Gable around 25 yards from me, wielding a spoon and singing that nonsensical song. I am frightening myself by documenting this. I forcefully closed my front door, unlocked it, and remained on the opposite side for approximately 30 seconds, until curiosity compelled me to peer through the peephole. I am uncertain. Upon peering through the peephole, my legs nearly buckled beneath me. All I could perceive were her eyes gazing at me. I was too apprehensive to avert my gaze, fearing she may vanish upon my return. The gaze persisted for almost 1 minute, after which, unexpectedly, she began to kick and punch my door with maximum force. I stepped away from the door, contemplating whether to reveal my displeasure and avoid being manipulated. I get my phone and contact the cops. The knocking ceased, prompting me to return to the door. She gradually departed, chuckling. I have been unable to work since then. I am uncertain about the appropriate course of action. No one trusts my account, and I doubt I will forget this for an extended period. This occurred recently, when I was 14 years old. It was midsummer, and I was overnighting at my friend Jim's residence. There were 4 individuals present that night, and to maintain confidence, I will designate my pals as Jim, James, and Tom. The 4 of us had just returned to Jim's residence after an hour of physical activity at a trampoline park. Although it was late upon our return, we collectively resolved that the night remained youthful and opted to extend our outing. Typical boisterous adolescence, correct? I recall examining my phone and noting that it was 10 o'clock. I have always been exceedingly cautious when navigating through unfamiliar areas during the late hours of the night. I acquiesced to the proposal because A, we were in a sizable group, B, Jim's neighborhood is well illuminated due to the abundance of lampposts, and C, I was aware that we all have mobile phones and were swift runners, should an emergency arise. I believed we would be satisfactory. That constituted my initial error. After an hour of traversing the lit, affluent avenue and participating in debates that would only captivate the mind of a 14-year-old guy, we reached the end of the street. An exceedingly deteriorated metal gate loomed before us, starkly contrasting with the contemporary appearance of the preceding residences. An ominously imposing gate. I gazed at the floor. Beyond the obstruction lay a desolate expanse of earth and mounds of soil. It appeared to be in its nascent phases of development into a suburb. The 3 of us halted, although Jim, inexplicably, continued along. I interjected, "What, Jim? Are we departing?" However, there is nothing present beyond this point. It is merely an accumulation of soil. No, there exists another neighborhood beyond that point. I checked my phone once again and noted that it was now 11 o'clock. It is hardly surprising that my legs were becoming fatigued. We had been walking for approximately an hour, albeit at a sluggish pace. My legs remained fatigued from previous trampoline jumping. Fortunately, James remarked, "I am uncertain, my friend. Do you simply wish to return to your residence and relax?" "It is becoming rather late," Jim remarked as he had already vaulted the fence. "Hurry up, everyone. Do not exhibit cowardice. Let us proceed." The 4 of us proceeded on our journey to the subsequent neighborhood. That constituted the second error. I must address the arrangement of this community, as it will be significant later. Although Jim's neighborhood resembled a vast circle, this area appeared to consist of merely a singular street. However, this was not the sole distinction. It was paramount. Upon entering the dimly lit dirt lane, I sensed that something was amiss. I was uncertain about its nature, yet something felt incongruous. My son's tisk is likely due to the significantly darker nature of this neighborhood compared to his own. His street might have been the red carpet. There were no streetlights, and it seemed as though all the once bright stars had been extinguished, while the moon was obscured by a cloud sufficiently dense to obscure its luminous presence. While walking, I observed that the atmosphere felt unsettlingly silent, as if our presence was unwelcome. We entered an open crypt, and it was only a matter of time until the gravekeeper approached us trespassers. As we walked, it became evident that our prior casual and relaxed conversation had been supplanted by quiet. Subsequently, we observed a dim light emanating from a little distance ahead. We gradually began to restore our composure as we approached. The light source was identified as a streetlight, and I observed that the ostensibly one-way street permitted a left turn. It was at this corner where the light resided. The peculiar aspect of this corner was that instead of leading into another lengthy street, akin to the one we had traversed, it abruptly transitioned into a house. The road terminated immediately after this solitary house, with no other residences flanking it on either side. We all found this to be unusual and, in a sense, somewhat amusing. Consequently, when Jim proposed that we engage in ding-dong ditching, we unanimously identified the appropriate house to target. Third error. The execution of the ditching process was flawless. James, Tom, and I concealed ourselves behind a property while Jim approached and knocked on the front door. Shortly after the knock, a light illuminated within the upstairs window. The 4 of us interpreted this as our signal to leave promptly. In the midst of the excitement and chaos of our escape, we inadvertently took a false turn down an unfamiliar street, subsequently retracing our steps in the direction from which we had come. Once we had distanced ourselves from the house, we reduced our pace to a walk and commenced laughing and exclaiming about our meeting. The apprehension experienced when approaching the area was supplanted by a cunning sense of pride from our naughty achievement, and everyone reveled in the triumph. All individuals, with the exception of James. James ceased walking and faced backward, indicating a person behind us. Gentlemen, we are being followed.
My heart sank at hearing this statement, and I sensed the hairs on the back of my neck rise as I turned, seeing, to our dismay, an elderly man, Mr. Henderson, positioned directly beneath the streetlight. At that moment, I saw that our erroneous direction constituted our fourth mistake. We now had this individual positioned between us and the security of Jim's neighborhood. The most striking observation was the shocking reality that he seemed to be entirely unclothed. The illumination from above provided us with a distinctly repugnant view of the man's aberrant anatomy. Wrinkles adorned pallid arms and legs, juxtaposed with disheveled and unruly hair. The sole obstruction to his nether region was his protruding abdomen, which sagged excessively. However, what troubled me most was his disquieting smile. His smile revealed teeth so discolored that they were visible from approximately 75 yards away. The man remained motionless, gazing at us, his neck subtly inclined to one side. All four of us were immobilized. After a whole minute, we were relieved when Mr. Henderson turned aside and proceeded back to his residence. I exhaled a little sigh of relief, but this tranquility was fleeting upon realizing the man was retreating right towards us. The other three quickly noticed the deception and the reality that he was approaching us at an excessively rapid pace. We fled. All discomfort in my legs vanished as my thoughts asserted control. I commenced formulating a plan mentally. I recalled believing that this neighborhood was probably identical to Jim's and ultimately returned to the starting point. There is no such fortune. The four of us observed on the horizon the discouraging outline of another dead end, but this time it was succeeded by a thicket of vegetation too dense to traverse. We were ensnared. At this juncture, we commenced to perceive shouting behind us. I could not discern the content of his speech, however, it resembled a woman's voice, and I recall the menacing closeness of his utterances. My eyes became moist with trepidation. I looked back and observed that Mr. Henderson was still far behind us, but he had now turned around and was sprinting as well. Upon approaching the cul-de-sac, I observed that residences remained on all sides. I devised a strategy. I advanced to the forefront of our party upon reaching the gate and instructed everyone to follow me. We proceeded to the vicinity of the last residence on the left side. Noticing that Mr. Henderson was around 4 homes distant, I directed us to the backyard, where a line of big pine trees stood, and asked everyone to raise their hoods. From our position, we could observe between the houses to view the side of the road on which Mr. Henderson was running. Very well, I said. We shall remain here and observe the area between those residences. Upon observing his passage, we swiftly proceeded to Jim's. Consensus on the idea was reached, and we collectively commenced our vigil. Within 2 minutes, a shudder coursed down my spine as we heard the same voice from earlier, in the backyard with us. I now discerned that it was not a woman's voice, but rather a man's voice attempting to reach an exceedingly high pitch, akin to an imitation of a sick and deranged Mickey Mouse. He nonchalantly inquired, "Do you wish to emerge, or must I seek you out?" Without hesitation, we all transitioned into an accelerated sprint, moving as swiftly as possible. We did not reflect on the past. We remained silent. We continued running until we returned safely to Jim's garage. I could not ascertain how Mr. Henderson overtook us so swiftly, given his initial distance from us. We could not ascertain the reason for him being completely unclothed while pursuing young guys in the dead of night. The primary lesson I acquired is that I shall never engage in ding-dong ditching again. I reside in a pleasant area. It is not affluent by any standard, yet it is relatively modern. During my childhood, I had a best buddy named Kevin with whom I engaged in all activities. To this day, we remain close friends. At that time, we were likely between the ages of 12 and 13 and were intimately familiar with the woods around our homes. On this day, we aimed to investigate some of the woods that we had not previously explored. We commenced in a familiar region and ventured further while engaging in playful activities. We encountered anything that was conspicuous. It was white yet soiled, and as we approached, it increasingly resembled large fragments of aged, corroded metal, contorted and protruding from the earth. Kevin approached it swiftly and leaped onto it, exclaiming to me that it was an automobile. It was quite astonishing for 13-year-olds to discover in the woods. I was somewhat inclined to remain in my current position. I harbored reservations regarding the situation, and we were unequivocally trespassing on another's property. However, my curiosity prevailed. I searched diligently and discerned a house in the distance, which did not instill confidence, as this would mark my inaugural experience of being pursued from someone's property.
The car was surprisingly in good condition despite being abandoned in the woods. The rear left tire was entirely submerged, and it included a convertible top, albeit not intentionally. Instead, it appeared to have been severed cleanly. Kevin was elated while I was examining the vicinity and the vehicle itself. We resolved to open the trunk to ascertain its contents. At that age, we were unaware of how to access the trunk, so we resorted to striking it with logs and attempting to force it open with sticks. After approximately 5 minutes of this, we were merely inflicting dents, prompting us to abandon the effort and contemplate an alternative approach. In the distance, Kevin observed a large boulder, which we retrieved and positioned on the trunk. We positioned ourselves on it and dropped it many times, ultimately breaking open the trunk. It emitted an odor reminiscent of stale iron and the scent typically encountered in an elderly person's residence. Within, there existed an antiquated wooden receptacle adorned with several latches, and it was otherwise entirely vacant. It appeared neither dusty nor dirty when covered. It was positioned directly in the center and erect, which I found somewhat peculiar. Due to the significant amount of dirt that entered upon opening it, we were generating considerable noise, which heightened my paranoia, prompting me to persuade Kevin to reopen the container at my residence. It appeared as though it had remained unopened for years. The latches were corroded, necessitating the exertion of considerable strength to disengage them. Contained within the box were additional black and white photographs of a young boy, Sam, with long hair, gazing vacantly at the camera, a necklace featuring an inverted star, and matches. Sam was likely 10 years old. Further in was a section where several local children constructed forts from sticks. We concealed our discoveries in our fort and departed before dusk, eager to inform the other children the next day. The following day arrived, and we assembled the other children to present our findings. Upon our arrival, all forts, except for Kevin's, had collapsed. Many of the other children believed we undermined them and attributed the blame to the older youths in the community. We visit our fort to observe our matches and all the boxes incinerated to ashes. The images of Sam are now positioned between stakes and scattered around the fort's floor, each with burn holes in the eyes. I am thoroughly unsettled and unable to articulate my feelings to the other children. They resolved to demolish our fort, believing it to be our responsibility initially. At that moment, we were indifferent. Our primary concern was the disarray of our surroundings. We began to persuade ourselves that someone was tampering with us and had stolen the jewels, as it likely possessed significant value. We captured the photographs, placed them in the container, concealed the box nearby, and searched the entire area for the necklace. Nothing. After a few weeks, Kevin's father asked me to the gym where he instructs, suggesting I could mess around while he attended to his responsibilities. Upon arrival, as I exit the van, I inadvertently lose an item. I gaze below, and there lies the necklace adorned with an inverted star. I call out to Kevin, and we begin to remorsefully recount the narrative to his father. He derides us and discards it into the sewer, assuring us that we have no cause for concern, nothing is pursuing us. Later that evening, feeling somewhat anxious and with my parents away, I opted to spend the night at Kevin's residence. We required an action controller to operate the Xbox, so we proceeded to my residence to retrieve one. The garage door was accessible despite being secured. At that time, I own a substantial 200-pound German Shepherd named Chance. Upon entering with Kevin trailing behind, a resonant, unsettling voice intoned, "Welcome home, Josh." I seized Chance, who was nearby, and fled in tears. Kevin's father inspected every area of my house but found nothing. Since the day we discovered the container, Kevin and I have continually encountered similar occurrences in our lives. I suppressed this recollection until I recently commenced smoking with Kevin. We discovered an exceptional smoking location within the same woods, but access was impeded by the inability to divert off the bustling highway, as a trail extended further into the area. At the age of 24, one could assert that we are adults. Recently, we ventured further from our parking location, smoked, and then retraced our steps. I consistently store my belongings in my trunk, so I opened it and placed the items inside. I brushed off the neighboring hoodie, revealing the photographs of Sam beneath it. The identical images, devoid of burn holes. I had not contemplated that in years. I experienced an anxiety attack and panicked, along with Kevin. We incinerated the photographs and interred them. I no longer require this to intrude upon my life. I anticipate several months of sleep deprivation.